If you've been paying any attention, you've heard Democrats out there say something like this.
Donald Trump's modern-day Gestapo is scooping folks up off the streets. They're in unmarked vans, wearing masks, being shipped off to foreign torture dungeons. No chance to mount a defense, not even a chance to kiss a loved one goodbye, just grabbed up by masked agents, shoved into those vans, and disappeared.
I'm Rich Lowry of National Review, and let's think about how dumb, wrong, and dangerous this kind of rhetoric is. In 1934, the Gestapo carried out an internal purge against Chancellor Adolf Hitler's political enemies known as the Night of the Long Knives. In 2025, ICE is arresting illegal immigrants to make sure that they aren't evading lawful immigration proceedings. Can you spot the difference? Can you spot the difference? Well, many on the left can't or won't.
When you compare the old films of the Gestapo grabbing people off the streets of Poland, and you compare them to those nondescript thugs who grabbed that graduated student, it does look like a Gestapo operation. It does look like the Gestapo.
One problem with this, obviously, is that if ICE is a Gestapo serving a quasi-Nazi regime, then any means necessary to try to stop it are justified. We don't criticize or look down on the people in Nazi Germany who tried to assassinate Hitler or tried to topple the regime from within. We valorize them. We make movies about them. Now, the people who buy into this Gestapo and Nazi rhetoric also understand the very intuitive and very simple moral logic involved. And that's one reason we've seen this series of attacks on ICE facilities and ICE agents, including this horrific shooting in Dallas, Texas.
I can confirm at this time that the FBI is investigating this incident as an act of targeted violence. It is unfortunately just the most recent example we've seen of targeted violence, to include here in North Texas, where back on July 4th, we saw a coordinated attack carried out against an immigration detention center in Alvarado, Texas. What I can also share with you is that early evidence that we've seen from rounds that were found near the suspected shooter contain messages that are anti-ICE in nature.
Why does the left feel this bizarre compulsion to call its opponents Nazis and fascists and all the rest of it? Doesn't matter whether it computes at all. George W. Bush, who made a point of being a so-called compassionate conservative, was called a Nazi back in the day. I think the left just loves the feel of this charge, how it sounds, loves the sheer maliciousness of it. Now, of course, Nazism is not a point on the American political spectrum such that if you are a click or two to the right of the old Republican consensus, you must be a Nazi. Moreover, it's deeply anti-American to believe that we live in a country where neo-Nazism is not just a poisonous, irrelevant fringe, but is on the verge of taking over the country and committing terrible crimes. These people don't just need to read a book, they need to get acquainted with the country they live in. Nazism was never normal. It was born of the wrenching destruction of World War I and represented a fundamental break with the norms of Western civilization. It was irrational, it was bloodthirsty, it was obsessed with conquest and racial purity. Think about it. If Hitler had merely sought, say, to eliminate funding for the Nazi equivalent of public broadcasting, he wouldn't have been the most notorious figure in modern history. Donald Trump seeks to fire heads of independent agencies. Hitler wanted to murder mentally ill people. Donald Trump believes that we need to enforce the border. Hitler believed he had to conquer Europe and cleanse the East of Untermenschen. Donald Trump posts outlandish things occasionally on Truth Social. Hitler made a, quote, prophecy that if war came, it would bring, quote, the annihilation of the Jewish race in Europe, end quote. But the left plays this game where they find the lowest, most meaningless common denominator between something happening now and the Nazis and act as if that proves something. The Nazis had military parades. Trump wanted to have a military parade. Nazi. Our military wears boots. The Wehrmacht wore boots. Nazis. The Gestapo was an internal police force. ICE also does policing internally. Nazis. This was basically the logic that Rachel Maddow used a couple weeks ago. Check it out.
Imagine the cartoon-level caricature of what you think a dictatorship looks like. I mean, it's secret police, right? A massive, anonymous, unbadged, literally masked, totally unaccountable internal police force.
Needless to say, it matters hugely what a police force is doing internally. ICE agents are simply doing their job, which is a function of the legitimate power of the federal government to regulate immigration and to make sure that people aren't living or working here illegally. The Gestapo arrested political enemies without due process. They harassed and committed acts of violence against partisan enemies of the Nazi Party. They secretly monitored religious groups and on with lawless and hideous acts. ICE is enforcing American laws democratically adopted that say illegal immigrants shall be detained until their immigration process reaches its conclusion. If anything, illegal immigrants in this country who get detained have too much due process. And by the way, even with ICE's stepped up enforcement, mass defiance of our immigration laws is still the norm. There are millions and millions of people who are living here and working here illegally. Another thing going on here is the left hates the idea of exclusion. Now, they're happy to exclude people they disagree with. That's a point for another day. But they think exclusion is inherently hateful and wrong. But here again, it matters. Why are you excluding, right? It's one thing if you're excluding Jews from your political community and undertake lawless measures against them and persecute them based on an ancient hatred that's taken on an even more perverse and evil modern form. That's Nazism. What ICE is doing is excluding people from the legitimate borders of our sovereign nation in keeping with laws that have been democratically adopted. And they are not doing it on the basis of ethnicity or national origin. They are doing it on the basis of legal status. And by the way, they're not persecuting these people. They are enforcing the law. And if they don't have a claim to stay here, they're just being sent home. And by the way, this country still has a massive open door when it comes to legal immigration. Something like 1 million new legal immigrants come to the United States every year, but it's ICE's job to exclude those immigrants who are violating our laws by coming here and working here. Now, another bugaboo of the left is that ICE agents are now wearing masks. This comes up again and again.
Masked agents of the state in unmarked vehicles are terrorizing communities.
They don't have any identification. They're wearing masks.
Secret police who are masked, who are intimidating, who are scaring people.
Okay, but why are they wearing those masks in the first place? It's because they're operating in a threatening environment. People are resisting their operations. People are physically assaulting agents. People are doxing agents to threaten them and their families in their homes. The masks wouldn't be necessary if everyone was peaceful and accepted the legitimacy of ICE. Instead, the left has created this idea that ICE is the equivalent of the Gestapo, which leads to a threatening environment. They wear masks in response to that environment, and then the masks themselves are taken as another sign, supposedly, that they are the modern day Gestapo. It is perverse. And the ultimate question here is who is really undermining our system? ICE is a function of our democracy and our laws, whereas violent acts serve to undermine our democracy and our laws. So who is really using the fascist-like tactics here of intimidation and violence, and who is defending our democracy? I'm Rich Lowry, over and out.